The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Big Ben Haslar presiding. Rise for the Honorable Judge Haslar. Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice! Today we're hearing the case of the People versus the Burbs, a 1989 comedy thriller that follows a group of neighbors convinced that the newest residents of their sleepy neighborhood are hiding a terrible secret. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are being considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon Dylan to prove beyond a shadow of reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Having said so, Mr. Schlender, please present your opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, Your Honor. God, guys, I really wish the barbarians would leave us alone. The Burbs from 1989 was rightly ignored and disregarded in its day. Its only glimmers of success were reflections of Tom Hanks's triumph in Big. But now, at the direction of Joe Dante no less, the barbarians are at the gate saying, no, 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 it was ahead of its time. It is brilliant. And so much more. And frankly, and I know this because it's my job, it is just more fun to try to rehabilitate a movie than just admit what is plain to see. Despite being a well-known hack, Ebert gave this a poor review. But what was truly the height of hackery was the reappraisal review that is as fawning as it is vacuous, written by Max Kybers in 2018 on Ebert's site. I may owe Ebert an apology. So, what are the issues with this movie? That we can see on the screen. First, the characters are all too similar. There's no breathing room or enough contrast. The three mains are like Phil Spector's wall of sound in flesh. Secondly, Joe Dante just can't help himself. His greasy fingerprints are all over this movie, the comedy undermining the tension, and the tension undermining the comedy, an inverse of the formula that worked so well for him in Gremlins, and I would even say his segment in Twilight Zone, the movie. And lastly, and most importantly, listen here, the movie undermines all of its commentary because the characters were right. They are not the lunatics. No, indeed, we are the lunatics for giving this movie a second chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schlender. Lovely 5-paragraph essay. We love that format around here. Appearing on behalf of the defense is Miss Divinity Rose. Please present your opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you very much. I promise I'm not going to give you a 5-page essay. I don't have much to talk about. Your Honor, gentle people of the jury, I must defend this cult classic on behalf of the many people who love this film, which in itself is testament to its greatness. I have yet to speak to anybody that does not like this film. This film has great production quality, a script that fits that golden formula, and an all-star cast. And without a single sex scene, they bring the appeal. This film has eye candy for everyone. They have the lieutenant and what I call the coo-tenant, which is a super hot wife whose cooter about hangs out of her shorts the entire time she's bent over. The lieutenant himself, like a Christopher Lloyd meets Buff Fight Club Brad Pitt. So it's like hitting girls who love buff, but also the weird, smart, or quirky. Tom Hanks is showing off his fit and silky smooth looking legs. And then you've got Corey Feldman as this young, fun heartthrob who's also nice and mature. I don't know, but it hits all these different spots for all these different people. And it actually, I disagree that it was ignored at the time, because it was a financial success. Although it was modest, from what I understand, it was a financial success. So that is my case. I'll be approaching it from the angle of the cast, the cinematography, and the color palette, and that it's a study in the human condition.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. Look forward to hearing to it. Mr. Schlender, you may present your first exhibit.
Thank you, Your Honor. So this movie leans heavily on its three main characters, portrayed by Tom Hanks, Bruce Dern, and the other guy. They say he's. They try to make jokes about him being fat, but he just looks built. He looks like a rugby player. Okay, he's not fat. So all three are paranoid and abrasive, and they're cranks. They move the plot forward with their over-the-top suspicion of their neighbors, and whenever one of them dithers, usually Hanks, they're brought in line pretty quickly. It would have been better to have seen more from these characters that could help explain their actions. Bruce Dern's character, for example, is a paranoid Cold War nut, redolent of 83's The Survivor, which is much funnier with Robin Williams. Fat Canadian comic, he's just that. He's just there to be abrasive. And Hanks is, of course, the biggest missed opportunity. Some original drafts of the script pointed out that Hanks was recently fired and not on vacation, or that he lost his job, not necessarily that he was fired. This would have been a potent contrast, to be sure, but is completely lost in the movie. Now, it would be very easy to blame Dante for being a hack, but we can't. This was a result of a writer's strike that did deep damage to the script. Look, I get it. Life gives you lemons. Make lemonade. But you still need sugar, and there was none here. If we want to find the movie guilty because of the damage the strike did to it, have at it. We do know it resulted in carbon copy characters that we did not really care for because the movie gave us nothing to cheer for or understand about them.
Okay. Miss Rose, one of your selling points was the cast for this film. Is Dylan just here to be abrasive like one of the characters?
Guess which one I am.
I think so.
Rugby player?
I think so. I think that he brings up the point that they were all grumps there, and he's pointing towards the fact that they're all the same character, but they're clearly not. I mean, Tom Hanks does his famous blah freak out stuff, and none of the other characters do that. So you're wrong, Dylan. Seriously though,
him and the Canadian rugby player do the same exact freak out when they find a themer.
That's true, I guess. So the three characters that you're talking about are different because you have, maybe they're all a little grumpy, but suburban men can be. Like, they don't want to be bothered, but they have identifying elements. And then you have this rounded out fourth guy that they're trying to include in their group with Corey Feldman. He's younger. I don't know why he's home alone. I couldn't tell at first. Is he a teenager? Is he in his 20s? But then he mentions parents being gone. So, but he seems awfully mature for his age, but maybe that was just the 80s. Either way, he kind of rounds it out. He's a totally different character than the other three. And I think he ties them together nicely.
I think they kind of forgot Corey Feldman was in the movie till the end. And they kind of tried doing the bit where he's watching the movie with us. He's like, oh, you got to see what everyone's doing. It's way better than real life, as most of the action is happening in backyards that aren't visible or in people's basements that aren't visible. So maybe he's just got a really active imagination. But I'd be willing to move on to my next point, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
All right, look. I think it's safe to say that after M. Night Shyamalan, Joe Dante might be this court's favorite director ever since J. Lee Thompson lost that straw poll we did. And we all remember the Gremlins 2 incident of ROJ-343. So Dante Maynard does remember, you can tell by that laugh. So Dante has a style, and it served better when leaning into the horror thriller aspects instead of the comedic aspects. So he should be focusing on more horror thriller with dashes of comedy as opposed to the inverse. Dante's on record saying, he took this movie to try to break away from that box that he was put in. Again, like the Gremlins and Howling. And this just reminds me of like when Michael Jordan played baseball for a year or so. Remember that? Crazy times. So,
Thank you, Space Jam.
right? So Dante had to make sure there was tension and levity in this feature, and he often failed at both. That femur scene I was just discussing, when it's discovered, that's accompanied by screaming and the camera zooming in and out, right? So it's like, oh my God, they really are murderers. Whoa. And it's like, okay. And then we have the Wile E. Coyote-esque human cutouts when he falls through the roof, and Tom Hanks surviving an explosion. I mean, forgive me for not taking a murder plot seriously when everyone is seemingly invincible. Look, Joe Dante wanted to try something new. And I think he hit a lot of those goals in his Twilight Zone segment. And he did not have the wherewithal to make it into a feature, i.e. The Burbs. But this failure here would serve him well later on in his career because he absolutely nails it in Small Soldiers. There he cracked the code, right? Make something that is not supposed to be scary, i.e. toys, as opposed to, I don't know, a clearly homicidal neighbor and his family, where the twist is that they actually are a homicidal family.
The twist is there is no twist.
Yes.
Miss Rose, do you think the style that Dante uses here helps the film, or do you have any rebuttals to his arguments?
Well, I will say that first of all, the prosecution needs to understand this isn't about being believable. It's an escape. It's a fantasy. It's for fun. It's a comedy. I mean, you didn't really think that like Rick Moranis was gonna get laid in Ghostbusters. Like, you wouldn't believe that, right?
Well, he was possessed by a demon dog at the time, and so
yeah,
was
but
Thanos,
still,
so just
I mean,
saying.
okay, well then it's very believable.
The demon
that
dog
Moranis
got laid,
would
not
be
Rick Moranis.
possessed by a demon dog, I guess, or Michael Jackson really would turn into a werewolf, or any of these things from the 80s, or movies in general that are meant to be fantasy. And we've entered this age where everybody's like, it's not believable, it's not real. But like, that was the whole point of movies at one point, was to not be real. So I think that's kind of a weak argument to just say, oh, it's not believable that he lived through an explosion. But I bet you watched lots of Looney Tunes growing up, didn't you? And they all lived through everything.
Well, Joe Dante watched a lot of Looney Tunes, and it's plain to see on the screen. But my point is the internal logic of the movie. If we're supposed to feel tension and dread about this family being full of murderers, we need to make sure that, well, people can actually get murdered, right? It's very incongruous to what Dante himself was trying to establish, which is actually going to dovetail right into my third point. But calling this a weak argument, I think you're not seeing the whole picture here. We have a movie that's supposed to be funny and supposed to give us a sense of dread, to have a thriller element to it. And these work against each other. They're not harmonious, which we know Dante can do because we saw him do it in Gremlins.
Well, sure, and I have to say that I'm also fighting to defend Joe Dante because I'm from Kentucky and we have this great convention, Wonderfest, and Joe Dante is the like guest of honor this year, so for the 40th anniversary of Gremlins. So I'm defending to the death.
And Dylan is not invited.
But I also want to say, you think I'm not seeing the bigger picture, but I think you're not seeing the bigger picture, because if you look at this more as like not supposed to have a sense of dread, but more about the fact that it's making fun of the way that humans in suburbia get paranoid about everything. And in this film, they happen to be right. So maybe every once in a while it's right. And I'll get more into that in my own arguments.
That's actually basically what my third point is about, if I may, Your Honor.
You may, sir.
Thank you. So I would say this is the most important point, and I wanted to save it last. And it's the commentary this movie is trying to make about the suburbs, late Cold War paranoia, the rise of the satanic panic, and all of this commentary, and I do mean all of it, is undone when we find out Hanks and his crew, wait for it, were right. The neighbors were murderers. I watched an interview with Joe Dante from a few years ago. It was on the Nico 7 YouTube channel from August 27th, 2022.
They don't have any merch to give you. You don't need to call them out.
Well, I just want to give proper citation. I'm not making this up, right? And Joe was sitting there like a king, greatly enjoying the laurels that the barbarians were throwing at his feet, only to have nothing to say and have the coldest expression flash through his eyes when the one woman on the panel, and maybe this is what bothered Dante, who's to say, pointed out that Hanks and his crew were right. Dante was left speechless because he just got done talking about the commentary and how this was undone. But don't worry, Dante is not short of sycophants, and they piped up saying, well, they were right for the wrong reasons. Well, excuse me. What wrong reasons? The neighbors were acting suspicious. They were not socially engaged. They had a mysterious origin. And this is what's really important. They were acting like murderers because they found human remains on their property. And this is just funny because I want to point out something from my own life that happened personally. I live next to a man that murdered his mother and blew up his house. And guess what? He acted a lot like the Colpecks did in this movie. So what we're watching is like someone making a movie critical about the Salem witch trials, trying to show you how bad they were, only to concede, but yes, they were killing real witches. And I will rest there, Your Honor.
Ms. Rose, do you have a rebuttal to this point? Were the crazy people rightfully crazy or unbelievably crazy? 10 Cloverfield Lane, maybe?
Well, I think that a lot of, and I'll get into that, but I think a lot of people in neighborhoods do keep a close eye on what's going on. And in their minds, and in a lot of movies, in their minds, the people seem that outlandish, right? But maybe they're not. And in this movie, they were. So, it's kind of a twist because in most movies it's not. It's just all in their heads. And in this one, they're like, you know what? Nah, let's make it. They really are.
I'm sure my neighbors are wondering what I'm doing with this judge's wig inside my apartment because this is
I think it's the lack of pants that they're more worried about, Your Honor.
Oh, that might do it. Miss Rose, you may present your first exhibit in defense of the film.
All right. Well, we already got into it a little bit, but this was an all-star cast and team. It had Joe Dante, which I called God Director of the Gremlins because I loved it so much. And, he did Inner Space and countless other films, so he did stuff that was just comedy. Ron Howard was a producer. Acting, you've got Carrie Fisher, Tom Hanks, Corey Feldman. You even got bit parts like Dick Miller as the garbage man. And, I was looking, I think he's actually in all of Dante's films.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to be in all of them, yeah.
He is.
Yeah, if you start digging into credits, IMDb credits, even some small parts like voiceovers were done by cool people like Tracy Newman, who was a founding member of the Groundlings, and Jeffrey Kramer, who was in Jaws and Clue, and lots of other projects. And then he went on to become a producer, and he was executive producer of shows like Ally McBeal and Bob Dylan's 30th anniversary concert celebration, and then more confusing things like Bigfoot Presents Meteor and the Mighty Monster Trucks.
Cool. I want to talk about that next episode.
Places after the Burbs. But that's besides the point. Everybody wanted to be a part of this film because it was great. It was fun. It was a good time.
Mr. Schlender, this film is absolutely packed with talent. Doesn't some of that leak onto the screen?
You would think so, but I don't think Joe Dante was interested in exploring the talent he had at his disposal. And again, this isn't a fault of his. I do think the writer's strike really hurt what they were able to do. So I think we're looking at, because we know that there were different ideas that never made it into the script. If we read the IMDb trivia, one of them saying like it was the garbage men were originally going to be found in the trunk of the car, which would make a lot more sense than all the bones. Why are they driving around with the bones? Why aren't they going back into the house when they find Tom Hanks? I mean, there's a lot of little plot holes I could needle on all day. But when it does come to the talent in here, I don't think we see these actors at their best roles. No one's going to say this is Carrie Fisher at her best. They might say it's her at her middling. This is certainly a far cry for Tom Hanks. I think he was even better in Joe versus the Volcano, another movie that I had to prosecute for this, but at least his character had some kind of depth.
Not Guilty film, if I recall.
That's true too, and probably for good reason. But here's the thing: we just don't get to see that on the screen, and I do attribute that more to the damage that the writer's strike did. Joe Dante isn't a director known for his ability to capture very good ad-libbing, which is something that was encouraged on the set, and I just don't think we see how good this talent is. We do not see them shine in this film.
All right. Ms. Rose, you may present your second exhibit.
All right, just real quick, I want to say, Harrison Ford is in Shrinking, and I wouldn't say he's at his best, but it's still enjoyable.
Boom.
Don't get me started on Harrison Ford.
Right.
I have a Harrison Ford headache right now.
So, my next piece of evidence, Your Honor, is just the production quality was fun and it was enjoyable. Like I said, I had a good time. If I want to watch a comedy, even if it's got a slight thriller or horror element to it, it's dark comedy, which is what I would think this is more just dark comedy, not necessarily a thriller. Then I want to have a good time, and I did, and so did all the people who love this film. It had a great color palette, it had good cinematography. There's no real breaks in the flow. Maybe the little cutout human thing is wonky. I did not remember that, but it evidently wasn't as bad as the last thing I defended on here, which also has a human cutout of Chevy Chase.
I was thinking about that.
So I don't know how
you have a type, apparently.
Some cheesy cutout in them, but
You've been typecast.
Yeah. It obviously wasn't that bad because I had forgotten about that part until you brought it up. But it's acted well. Maybe they didn't get to put on their most career building performances with this, but they seem to have a good time, and I had a good time, and that's really there's no production flaws that made this a bad film.
Mr. Schlender, humor is subjective, of course, but can you make this an objective rebuttal?
Well, the production aspect of the movie is interesting because it has the benefit of being shot in the very famous Universal backlot where like Leave It to Beaver and the Munsters were filmed. So it has a rich, and actually then years later, Desperate Housewives would be filmed there as well. And it has a rich history for that purpose. So it does make the film an interesting curio if you have an interest in like that studio history. This movie would have to be on the list for that, but I think we could acknowledge that interesting aspect of it without conceding that makes the movie not guilty. I think we still have a movie that's guilty of being bad that just so happens to have an interesting bit of history with it.
Miss Rose, do you have any more exhibits?
I have one final exhibit.
Lay it on us.
All right. This film is a study in the human condition. Okay, we talked about that a little bit, but it brings to the forefront how humans always fear what is different from them. And sometimes there's a good reason. And, in this film, they did carry out that sometimes it really is the person next door. And I'll get into that a little more in my closing statement, but I do want to say that the girl version of this movie was remade in recent years, like a lot of movies, but it was remade as the app Next Door, where a bunch of bitty housewives post every time they see something suspicious.
I like it.
Heard of this.
And by suspicious, they mean a person of color. Like, people are still, I know that's a horrible thing to say, but this is something that I get so mad at seeing on the app, but people are still afraid of things that are different from them and people that are different from them. So the human condition in this film, it didn't go away in the 80s. Like, it's still a relevant topic.
Mr. Schlender, I'd like to hear a rebuttal on this, but just to make it fun, you were forbidden to say Cold War.
Yeah, and that's why I brought that up, because you said, oh, it's just the post-Cold War, whatever. No, it's still like that. In one day, the story will probably be retold telepathically between aliens about the crusty Earthlings who've moved into their hood.
Oh, maybe.
I'll be there for that.
So, at the height of U.S.-Soviet tensions, Obviously, this
isn't
more
taboo, Mr. Schlender. You knew what I meant.
Anyway, no, but I can address that point because even Dante himself has said that's what he wanted the movie to really be about. And in the same interview, he said, "Look, we could have made the Colpex black, but then the movie's just not really funny anymore." And I think he's right. I think it would be a hard watch. But we just can't ignore the fact that the way that the Colpex were acting suspicious. They weren't acting like a quirky family down the road, who like they were acting like they had something to hide because they did. They were murderers, and they murdered the people who lived in that house and just moved in. So I also find that very strange that like that wasn't picked up and noticed upon. He mentioned like where was the moving van. But if this is supposed to be a meditation on the human condition, but the message at the end is, but hey, sometimes you're right, and it's a good thing because obviously stopping the Colpex was a good thing, so they couldn't keep killing. It's just very confused. And like I said, in that interview, when they mentioned that to Dante, you could see it flash through his face, and I think he understands the missed opportunity. I think he understood that otherwise pretty decent speech of Hank saying, "We're the lunatics," and then completely undoing that just took all the gas out of the movie.
I think you're missing the point that usually in comedy, coming from a comedy background, sometimes you address a topic by showing people how ridiculous their thought patterns are. And I think the fact that this guy just straight up attacked him for no reason, and when he was getting away with whatever in the back of an ambulance is pretty ridiculous. Like, and I understand that it can cloud it a little bit. And even if your point there is true and it does get confused, and yes, it could have made a better statement if maybe they went a different route with it. But that doesn't mean it's a bad film. It was still entertaining. It was still a good time.
No, what makes it a bad film is it's on top of all the other things I mentioned. And like that attacking in the back of the ambulance and the ambulance driving around all crazily in the cul-de-sac. Again, this is an example of Joe Dante not being able to help himself, not knowing how to rein in some of these comedic elements to undo. And he's not able to rein in the comedy to serve the tension of Tom Hanks potentially getting killed by the doctor, and again, this is right after he just took all the air out of Tom Hanks's otherwise pretty decent speech that would have been a great capstone for the movie. It would have been like Joe Dante had Twilight Zone on the mind. He just got done doing the Twilight Zone, the movie where man, you have to help me with the name. The Monsters of Rainy
Monsters
Street.
Arrive at Maple Street.
And that was
Monsters are due on Maple Street.
Monsters, yes, and that was originally going to be in the movie, as we know. Spielberg was originally going to do it, and ultimately pivoted. So Dante would have known this. He would have had that on his mind while he was making the Burbs. I don't think this is much of a leap, and to kind of undercut that message by then saying, well, no, they really were murderers. That's ultimately why this movie is going to be found guilty. It just takes all of what could have been fun, what could have been an interesting commentary, and flushes it. And it's just, you sigh, you won't want to watch the movie again because of it, because it's not going to do anything interesting at the end.
Well, I'm a little confused. Do you want a Jeepers Creepers with a few laughs thrown in? Like, I don't think this film was supposed to have a lot of tension. It wasn't supposed to be Nightmare on Elm Street. It was supposed to be a comedy. The fact that they zoom in and out, like you mentioned, on a femur, all goofball, slapstick, means this is a comedy. I don't think the tension was ever meant to be there. Yeah, there's a little kooky, spooky side to it, but I don't think it was ever meant to be a thriller or something that scary or that needs a lot of tension.
Well, Joe Dante would disagree, as I said in that interview when he was discussing it. That was very much on his mind, and I just think he wasn't able to stick the landing this time. Because again, I think Joe Dante is a good director. I think he does have a style. You basically know when you're watching a Joe Dante movie. But look, all the greats, they can't all be hits, right? And this one was a fumble.
Nonsense. Thank you both. Both sides have rested their cases. The attorneys will now present their closing arguments. Mr. Schlender, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Look, we had a lot of fun here today. We could all see where Dante fumbled. I'm fine blaming the writer's strike, as it clearly did take a toll on the film. The characters do not provide a lot of interesting contrast. Dante was in over his head. To his credit, he learned from this bomb, and more importantly, we can't ignore how much the commentary suffers with this ending. Remember that hack review I mentioned from Ebert's site? The title to it is "We're Still the Lunatics," and we must reject this. Let the hacks tell on themselves all day, but don't pull me down with you. We saw a movie that was grating and self-defeating, and because of that, we can vote guilty with a clear mind. And we know Hanks and Dante would go on to do better things after this. So I guess I feel bad for that other guy. What's his name? The Canadian. Who cares? Case dismissed.
Not quite yet, sir. And stop stealing bits.
Never.
Miss Rose, you may
his
present.
bit.
No, his.
They're on to me.
It's hot bit. It's hot bit. Miss Rose, please present your closing argument.
I'd like Your Honor to reflect for a minute on Tom's silky smooth legs, the lieutenant and lieutenant, Carrie Fisher whipping Hanks into submission,
Oh, yeah.
Corey Feldman kicking teenage girls into puberty. Reminders to both rural folks and city folks why they live where they do. You know, because I've lived in the city and I've lived in suburbia, and like our dear person said, suburbia is where you hear about murders. Like, that's where guys go crazy and kill their wives or vice versa, and then you don't hear about it for months to years because the neighborhood seems safe enough. So that's just another point that this reflects on the true nature of suburbia. We need generations to come to have this film. Children of the future need to, they see all these films with spooky houses in their neighborhoods, but this film will remind them that sometimes the people in spooky house really are murderers.
And on that cheery note,
my most important closing statement is that it was an enjoyable film. It's tons of fun. Tons of people like it for that reason, and I don't think we can label it a bad film.
We do that a lot, though.
Depends on who slips us the 20s. Thank you all. Members of the jury, Mr. Big Ben Haslar,
It's your
Mr.
name.
Maynard Bangs. No, it's not me. That's an entirely different guy sitting over there. And Mr. I Hate Cul-de-sacs, Ryan Luis Rodriguez. You have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is up to you to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict. Right this way. I say you three do deliberation so much, I just ought to engrave your names onto the chairs. Ugh.
The bailiff finally began to understand the format of the show.
We just have bad luck. We do.
A lot to chew on this one, gents. Very interesting case. Ryan, I'd like to hear from you first. You're our resident Dante devotee.
I am, and I would give this movie a gentleman's 7. It is not in my top 5 Dantes. I think it comes around 6 or 7. So I don't love it, but there's elements of it that I really enjoy. But the thing that really I grasped onto when I was watching it for this episode was that I wish that this movie was rated R. I wish that it was a full-blown dark comedy, whereas right now it's kind of a broad comedy with speckles of darkness. And it has a poisoned soul, and I really wish that Dante leaned into that, which he eventually did in Gremlins 2, which has a pitch black soul. And that's the way I like it, which I know, Rob, we do not agree on that film, but that's besides the point. But
I'll agree with it having a pitch black soul.
Okay. I'm glad we can agree on something regarding Gremlins 2, and I don't have to threaten you this time. But Yeah, I enjoy this movie. It has a lot of the Dante elements that I really latch onto, and I think that there's enough to say that it's worth having this discussion, but I don't know if it's necessarily enough to tilt this into bad.
Best Ben, what are you thinking?
So true story. I was watching this film to do this deliberation, and I thought like it all seemed familiar, but I was thinking it was like that Neighbors film that we had to do for this show with Dan Aykroyd in it.
Yeah.
Then I went to Letterboxd, and it turned out I had watched it. And I had watched it recently. I had watched it in 2021 at the height of the pandemic. And then it kind of came back to me that my dad thought Corey Feldman was funny in it for some reason. It completely slipped my brain entirely. And even now, like I have a hard time like kind of gripping onto things. Just nothing about it sticks with me. Nothing about it like is real to my life. Watching it, I agree. It's kind of crazy. It's very off kilter. That does put it into not good territory, but it's also kind of not bad either. It kind of just sort of stumbles around. It's very middling for me. What do you think?
Well, I have probably seen this movie half a dozen times because they played it on Comedy Central nonstop in the late 90s.
Yes, they did. Yes,
I don't
that's
know if I ever
saw it.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever sat down, but it's kind of one of those things, oh, The Burbs is on, I'll catch 40 minutes of it till I gotta leave, I don't know if I'd ever sat all the way through it. And I had wanted to recently, and I was like, it'll be on the show eventually, and then it was. So Schlenzo's 100% right about that ending. It's a complete kick in the nuts if you're trying to have a serious message about paranoia. And Divinity kind of helped him, right? She was talking about those racist housewives. Well, now imagine this movie was about a racist housewife, and they were right. The black guys across the street were drug dealers, and they were killing people. That's not cool. That's not the message you want to send, right? It's it's supposed to be this paranoia is unfounded, and we base it on such shallow reasons.
And originally, in the original ending, they were not guilty.
Right. Now
you can find it on the Blu-ray. It's on there.
And now Schlenzo brought up a point which I kind of thought even hurt his. He brought up the Twilight Zone episode with the monsters are due on Maple Street, which is a great one. And that kind of is that ending. Oh, it's paranoia that's the enemy, not our neighbors. Okay, but it's an old story, right? And so if you look at Dante trying to turn it more comedy, as Divinity had said, that's why we have all the stupid, goofy slapstick. I don't think all the humor works, but I think it's there for him to go, hey, this is not that serious, guys. We're just trying to have a fun, entertaining ending with some driving around and some action, rather than a speech from Tom Hanks where it ends as a bummer. So I think it would hurt. I think that hurts this movie from being like a serious message. But I think it still succeeded with a lot of the comedy it was trying to pull off. Let's start locking it in. Rye Guy, what are you thinking?
Well, I think Dylan
Gentleman
put
7 seems pretty obvious, but
Dylan put up a great case. I have no idea how he honestly feels about this movie, as I usually don't whenever he does a case, because he seems so dialed in that I have no idea whether or not he believes.
That's where he got his name from. Dial in.
But I've been voting guilty a lot lately, and I feel bad about it. So I every single time after we're done recording, I was like, "Wow, I sounded like a real pain in the ass on that one," and it's not sitting well with me. So I guess I feel nice. I'm gonna go not guilty.
Best Ben, are you feeling nice?
I stick by it being off kilter and a little weird. I didn't know there was a writer's strike. That makes a lot of sense. They needed something to kind of like make it punchy at the end. They made the wrong choice. I don't think that's an excuse,
though. I mean, they need to adapt and overcome. Pull out a typewriter, Joe. Let's see what you're really made of as a filmmaker.
Well, he's a director.
So he can't do anything then.
But I don't know. Oh, then he'd be crossing the picket lines if he did that. Anyway,
not back then.
I do think it's forgettable. I stand by that, but it's not. I didn't hate it when I watched it. It just didn't speak to me. So I'll also go not guilty.
It's a ringing endorsement. I didn't hate it.
I didn't hate it.
Yeah. To me, that's the energy of this case. Like this being a cult classic, really is the barbarians wanting to pretend there's more meat on this bone than there is. But it's not such a bad little, like the production value is definitely there. Everyone's doing their part. Even the I don't know, Schlender did call him fat at one point, but he had also called him like a rugby player. So I think that sounds better. Rick
My
Ducommun,
point was
is
he
that his
wasn't
name?
fat. That's what I
Rick
said.
Ducommun.
Hey, get out of here.
Ducommun.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, Ducommun sounds better. His career would have been better if he said Ducommun. And Bruce Dern kicks ass too. I don't know. I don't know what the archetype of that paranoid neighbor is. You know, it's Bert from Tremors. It's Dale Gribble, like that paranoid, overprepared neighbor. Bruce Dern was it. And to me, that was one of Schlender's points, that they're too similar. I don't think so. They all react to a murder the same way, but they're different people. I think there are three different people that come into the same situation. So we're actually going to go unanimous here. I'm also going to go not guilty.
Okay, can I change my opinion to guilty?
Yeah, me
Sure.
too.
No! You're all locked in now because it's too late. I'm already going to tell that handsome judge.
He is. Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the people versus the Burbs, we find the defendant not guilty of being a bad movie.
Hey, all right.
Hey, looks like I made it.
The verdict is so rendered. Tom Hanks, you've served your time in comedy. You are now free to pursue the exciting world of prestige drama and maybe the occasional Robert Langdon film if it suits you. Court is adjourned.
No, take that back, Judge. Don't make him another one, please. I don't want another Inferno, please.
He already
Move
banged the
on.
gavel.
Damn it. This is Grumbly Grumblerson furious that I still have to be part of this goddamn podcast. Ready to interview my two least favorite lawyers here on the courthouse steps. They should have killed me off like Mumbly. Divinity Rose, you either won or lost this case. I wouldn't know because I wasn't paying attention. How do you feel about the jury's verdict? He asked as if he gave a crap.
Spot on. Even though it has its flaws, it's a lot of fun, and it's not a bad movie.
Great. Dylan J. Schlender, I guess I have to put up with you now. How's the verdict sitting with you?
Grumbly, I gotta tell you, I'm so angry, and I'm feeling the grumbles come right off you. No, I gotta say, actually, I kind of like this movie. What I really want to stress, though, and I'm glad at least Maynard acknowledged it, is like the barbarians are coming for this movie, trying to make it bigger than it is. What this is just a fun little oddball movie that you watch on Sunday afternoon because it's on Comedy Central, and it's perfectly good like that. The commentary suffers, and people saying it predicted reality TV. I mean, the things the cult out there is saying about this, it's extraordinary. It's just not at that level, but it's a perfectly fine little movie. So I will see you all in the post-trial. Thank you.
There you have it. 2 questions, 2 responses. There were 2, weren't there? Whatever. I'm gonna go back into suspended animation where I don't dream, but I am filled with pure white-hot hate. Let's go back to the studio for post-trial analysis.
You know, I'm just glad to know that I'm at least Grumbly's third least favorite. You know, I'm not in the bottom 2.
You're all tied for Grumbly. I hate to break it to you. You're
Oh,
all
no.
second least
Oh, no.
favorite.
That's Realsy award-winning Grumbly Grumblerson.
For, was it outstanding achievement in the field of court reportership or something?
I believe that is correct. The Mumbly Mumblerson
Yes,
Memorial.
the memorial.
Award.
The memorial. Oh.
Yeah. I wish Grumbly had been able to ask Schlenzo about how Schlenzo has never known Grumbly's name. For years now, they've been working together.
Grumberson.
I've never had to say it, and you wrote Grumberson, not Grumblerson.
Fun time. So,
is.
Divinity, what have you been up to? What's been keeping you busy? I hear it's a lot.
There's a lot going on. I have been busy with a comedy special by Mandy McKelvey that I produced, that we did a live taping of, and that's in post-production. I have a short comedy film in post-production.
Can you tell us names of those things so that we can find them later? Or do we have to wait?
The short film is called Blocked, and the comedy special is called Mandy McKelvey's Clam Special. It's about body autonomy and secrets women keep about their bodies, and she's
So there's
hilarious.
Not
as always.
seafood.
Not seafood.
Yeah.
I'm readjusting my
So I'm gonna be
cue,
sitting
I'm
there with like my
sorry.
pen and paper the whole time, like waiting to write down like how many clams I need, and no.
You guys were ready. You were like, clams and comedy, yes.
Oh man, Schlenzer would be beat red the entire show. He would be so flushed.
And she's hilarious. Everybody loves Mandy, and so that's done. We've got I've got a comedy feature screenplay that I finished last year that I'm working to sell right now. I am out traveling for a photography gig. I picked up to 34 cities, so I'm actually in West Palm Beach,
Wow.
Florida right now.
Yeah, you're in a hotel. You're live from the road. This is a road report.
Yeah, this is a road report. And yeah, I'm headed up the East Coast next. I'll miss the beaches.
Oh,
For sure.
this is not the time of the year for them. So,
Oh, the wind's
well,
been
in Florida they would.
terrible here.
It was nice. I'm sunburnt. It's
yeah, I guess I forgot. I was thinking you were
on the
like
beach in Fort DeSoto yesterday, and then I was in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and now I'm in West Palm Beach.
Nice. I thought you were like, I'm gonna head up to up north and see but I'll miss the beaches there. And it's like, oh, our beaches are terrible.
Oh no! I mean,
Yeah,
I will miss Florida as I head east because I'm going all the way up to Connecticut, then over to like Niagara Falls and across the top of the country. So
I will tell you, if you haven't eaten a hot like Manhattan clam chowder on a frigid Rhode Island beach at like 30-degree weather, you're not in New Englander. Well, of course,
yeah,
living.
I guess I have not done that. I'm not going
You
that
should.
far though. Connecticut's where I'm cutting over, but I as a kid I lived in Annapolis, so
I know someone who lives in Connecticut.
yeah, I know.
I am gonna go check out that show when you're over here. As long as you're within the state minimum, just get closer than New Jersey, and I'll go. I'm not going to Jersey, but get a little
that's
closer than
fair.
that,
No, I'm going to Hartford, but I'm stopping in Stamford too.
Perfect, absolutely.
Oh, you're coming in
No,
that
we're
way.
gonna be
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm coming in through.
Maybe
I'm
we'll
coming
get
in through New
Schlenzer out
York
of the
City.
house.
I'm going to Philadelphia and Jersey, Somerset, New Jersey, and then up through New York City.
No, it sounds awesome. You're living the dream.
Definitely get us those Hartford times, and Maynard and I will make a.
Are you going to be on the West Coast at all?
See what's up.
Not for this trip. This round trip is
then.
kind of cuts off at Minneapolis and then goes south again. But then I'm gonna be in Los Angeles probably in May.
Oh, there you go. See, Ben wants you in Colorado. You got to let him know when
Denver,
you get
Colorado.
out there.
Man, I did a cross country trip to California back in 2021, I think, and it was awesome coming through Utah and Colorado.
Oh, it's such a pretty drive.
Yeah,
and people can follow your journey on social media. I think I see you with puppets and everything on the road.
That is true. Yes. So on DivinityRose.com, I finally started releasing just silly little videos, the fanciful adventures of a curious ginger, and there are puppets for my wild imagination, and one of them is a jester who's actually a friend of mine died this past year, and so we made a puppet of him because he was a very fun jester at a Ren fair and stuff like that, so that he could still be part of a show that he was supposed to be a part of this year.
Oh, that's great.
And that's done. So now he travels with me and I take pictures and videos of him. I found a boat in Fort DeSoto, or no, Bradenton, Florida when I stopped for dinner. And it was named Mana Mana. So I stopped to make a quick video with the jester and my Sasquatch doing the song. So
no, that's really great. And I know everything you're doing because I follow your social media, which other people should too. You're doing murder mysteries, and you're Wilma Flintstone.
Oh yeah, so I did the Wizards at the Palace in Louisville, which is like basically they transformed this old beautiful theater into Hogwarts for the holidays, and there's a show. And after that, people saw that and started asking me to do these murder mystery trains because I do a lot of like character acting and comedy. Mm-hmm. So I've had some really fun, crazy characters from Sheila, who was the busybody, like I can't do it right now. I'm too tired.
Should do the whole case of Sheila.
Sheila was just that busybody who loves Pat Benatar, like she managed an office. She did everything. And then Wilma Stone, and they gave me one that I never really know what to do with, like mean characters. And I was like, what am I going to do? It was just a mean rich girl, basically. And I'm like, how will I make this interesting? So I just made her really like monotone and disinterested and say just awful things to people. Like,
Always
where are
on your
you
phone.
from? She's like, you know, oh, where are you from? And they're like, Nashville. She's like, ew, gross. Unless it's money Nashville.
Be from
And
somewhere
they're
that's
like,
funnier
oh,
next time.
it's not money Nashville. I'm like, oh, well, you should try to move to money Nashville. It's just awful stuff to people, and it's so not me. And so I had to find a way to lighten it up. So I had this person. It's like, and my husband in the story was having an affair, and it's like, it's okay. I have a love affair too, and you want to see? And I'd pull out this picture, and I'd be like, it's John Stamos, and it'd just be this like picture of John Stamos signed like XOXO.
He's a stud muffin.
And then like eviction notices were in my purse, and it's like, oh, for girls' night we go have mimosas and hand out eviction notices. It was just trying to find some way to have fun with the character. It was
That's actually
awful.
really funny.
Yeah.
Fake
Yeah,
eviction
and so-
notices. If you need to know how to be mean despite your real character, just talk to Grumbly.
Oh yeah.
He's mean every week. And you know, that's different from the performer who's
Yeah, whatever. It's like-
See, there you could have a new one built. Now we always ask for recommendations from our guests for movies that you think people should see. So what is a movie that you think people should see?
oh my gosh. Give me a
Any movie
second,
in the whole
'cause I'm-
world, your favorite movie, or anything you saw recently, whatever you like.
Like I can't even think of what I've seen lately besides 10 cities in the last week.
All right, we're circling back. Yeah, we Schlenzo, show them how it's done.
All right, thank you, Maynard. I was really thinking about what is my favorite Tom Hanks movie, and would it be a cheat to say a Toy Story movie? It probably is, but despite that, I'm going with Toy Story 3. And with all due respect to my dear friend Ryan, I think 3 is the strongest of the series, and having watched every Toy Story movie no less than a dozen times, I feel very comfortable saying that. Toy Story 3 captures a special kind of magic that we all feel when we are growing up. It invokes familiarity, not nostalgia, and it elicits real emotion, not cheap sentimentality. I'm looking at you, Up. We've been through so much with these characters, and Toy Story 3 does end with the promise of more adventures, but it ends this chapter of the toys' lives so perfectly, we don't really need, and we probably don't really want more. Toy Story 3 is most likely streaming on Disney Plus, but is probably worth owning in some form or fashion.
Why are you getting down on Up?
What? Because of the cheap sentimentality.
Oh, boo. 3 has to go head to head with 1, doesn't it?
We did 2 versus 4. I think 1 versus 3 would be very interesting.
I think it's.
And then the winner takes 2.
Yeah. Big Ben, you're the judge. Why don't you give us yours?
I'm going to recommend another broad comedy from the 80s, and one that I think often goes unnoticed. It's Steve Martin's The Man with Two Brains. This film is a tribute to those horror films of yore, back when you had to have a brain put in your title somewhere. Martin stars as Michael Hafarer, spelled exactly the way it sounds, a megalomaniacal brain surgeon who falls in love with a talking brain in a jar. There's almost a Mel Brooksian flavor to its homage of those brain movies, or B movies for short. And Martin has the time of his life throwing gag after gag at you just to see if they stick, and most of them do, like the funniest drunk driving test ever committed to celluloid. And of course, it also features Kathleen Turner, who has never looked more beautiful than she does in this film. And she's also very memorable as this femme fatale who tortures a horror throughout the entire duration of the film. It shouldn't work nearly as well as it does. And apparently known hack Ebert gave it a 2 out of 4, citing that he never cared for Martin, but he thinks that Martin was okay in this. So, it's got to be great by normal person standards. So check it out.
It's got to be. God, Ebert's such a freaking hack. It's ridiculous.
Have you seen? Shanzo, I thought you'd seen this one because you love all the Steve Martin stuff.
No, but I think Ryan featured it prominently on his podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
I did.
Ryan?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Pretty sure it also streamed on Comedy Central.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. That's the first time I saw it was on Comedy Central.
Yeah,
for sure. Divinity, have you thought of something now? Have you been inspired?
All right, so I'm just gonna stick with that theme and say that Dirty Rotten Scoundrels was one of the formulative films of my comedy growing up, and when I started loving comedy. and it's still to this day like one of my favorite movies that people who have not seen, I'm like, what? Go watch it. It's funny. It's very funny. It's Michael Keaton. It's Steve Martin. He's
Michael
teaching him to
Caine.
be a.
Michael Caine.
I'm sorry. Michael King. What did I say? I said Keaton, didn't I? Not
Yeah,
Batman.
they both
I
hung out with
apologize.
Batman. Yeah, but he
It
was
just
Alfred.
It was just my central process disorder spitting out the wrong name. And so it was Michael King, Steve Martin. Michael King is teaching him to be a con artist. Yeah, and it's hilarious. It's some of, I think, Martin's best character work. I loved it.
Yeah,
it's my
it's
favorite.
a great one. Second time it's been recommended on here. So
hey, with good
and
cause.
there's a strong female role that's a lot of fun.
What's Ryan's favorite Steve Martin film?
Good question. I think it might actually be Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid.
Mine is All of Me.
I love All of Me. All of Me.
That's so good.
Just watched that the other day.
Man, can we just do like a Steve Martin appreciation hour, Maynard?
Yeah,
we have plenty of movies of his to prosecute. I bet.
He's
no,
right.
it was what was it with
Mixed Nuts. That's
that's
the
secret one. Most people have never seen that, and I love that film.
I think it was Lee Schreiber's film debut. Oh yes.
Ryan, what have you got for us? Something that played on Comedy Central, I hope.
No, not at all. My recommendation this week is a recent release that I just discovered, Davy Chow's Return to Seoul from 2022. It follows a young woman who coincidentally finds herself in her home country of South Korea after having been adopted by a French family 25 years previous. She subsequently reconnects with her birth father, whom she has difficulty connecting with, and it launches her on a trajectory of self-discovery over the course of 7 years that never goes in the direction that you expect it to. The whole film is bolstered by an outstanding performance from Jaemin Park, her screen debut, and I cannot wait to see what she does next because she has the juice. There's something to be said for films that take the audience on a journey, and that is certainly what Chow has accomplished. It's one of those experiences that could be stretched across a couple more hours and remain just as magnetic. Return to Seoul is currently streaming on Amazon Prime, which is now charging extra to avoid commercials. Fuck Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, but
I prefer James Brown's Return to Seoul. Ow! Watchman!
It's optional though, right? The ad thing?
You can pay
you have to pay more to avoid
to not
the
get
ad.
ads.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, but a lot of the services now, you have to pay, even paid services, like you can have ads, and you have to pay more, and they keep upping it.
And the watchers at home, allow them to do it.
Stuff.
Hey, as long as Amazon Music doesn't start putting ads on, I pay a mint for that, but it's worth it.
Can you imagine like an ad coming in the middle of your jam?
Steve Martin,
Sorry.
A film of Steve Martin's that you could have on the show is My Blue Heaven.
Is that the mob movie? Yeah. No, that is a good one. He does not have white hair. He dyes it, so we could probably get that to guilty, I think.
Yeah, he didn't get his roots though. That's unfortunate. Now, the 80s was a great time for horror comedies, and Comedy Central used to play all the best ones, but they also played my recommendation this week, 1985's Transylvania 65000. Two tabloid reporters travel to Eastern Europe to uncover the truth behind the potential rebirth of Frankenstein and meet a whole slew of non-traditional horror ghoulies. Picture Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein if it was low budget, made in the 80s, and not funny at all. That's right, this movie is terrible, and if I hadn't wasted 90 minutes watching it, I wouldn't be recommending it. The tone of the humor is evocative of Rob Zombie's Monsters. Ed Begley Jr. is doing some kind of Lou Costello impression when he's scared that just makes you want to cringe to death. Michael Richards is doing that Michael Richards thing he did throughout the 80s. Yeah. You know what I'm fucking talking about. And worst of all, the cast features Jeffrey Jones. Yuck. The scariest monster of them all. So why recommend it? 2 words. Gina Davis. Gina Davis is a sexy version of Dracula, and that alone might be worth the price of your admission. You also get Carol Kane a couple of years before Princess Bride doing essentially the same shtick, and a beefy stud muffin in the form of 80s Jeff Goldblum, who would go on to star in The Fly the following year with Gina Davis. But otherwise, this movie is more of a Schlenzer recommendation. And frankly, it's not worth your time. But if you decide to schlep through it anyway, it's currently streaming. Oh, you guessed it. On Tubi.
Oh, of course.
We should confirm all you need to know about its relative quality.
I just am interested in the idea that Gina Davis ever was sexy, so it might be worth checking out.
Gina Davis?
Oh, it's a cheap joke. I'm sorry.
Gina Davis. It's not Miles Davis.
No,
Gina
I know.
Davis. She's in a league of her own.
Yes, I know, which I mentioned her. Also, another Steve Martin movie we could prosecute, Leap of Faith. Leap of Faith should be on the show. I would be interested in that.
I don't want to prosecute Steve Martin movies. I want to prosecute Chevy Chase movies.
Yeah.
We need Memoirs of an Invisible Man. I keep saying that.
No, stop it, Dylan.
I do keep saying it. Go back and listen to our past episodes.
And it's right. But with that,
And I do a spot-on Chevy Chase impression, as we all know. So.
Oh, man.
It is a great one. But we want to thank our guest, Divinity Rose, for joining us from the road. Rose from the road. Thank you so much for joining us.
Having me exhausted and sunburned and my brain not all here. I appreciate it.
That was a lot of fun.
It's always, you guys are so much fun.
Yeah, we love having you. And we're going to have you back, guaranteed. Maybe for a Steve Martin movie. Who knows? 80s comedies are a thing now.
Don't make me... Don't
say bad things about Steve Martin. We're gonna make
bad
it.
things about
No,
my
you can defend it.
comedy hero.
You can defend him.
I just want to pretend those don't exist because, like, I was so Rick Moranis and Steve Martin are two of my favorite actors, comedians ever, and I was so disappointed when I finally watched My Blue Heaven this year. When somebody told me they were in a film together, I was like, "What?" And I wanted to watch it, and it was.
Why haven't I seen this? Oh,
We
that's
might
why.
have to. Might have to do it because
Yeah.
I'm very interested in how they can make it back. I don't know if that was on Comedy Central though, Brian.
It was.
Yeah, I kind of think it was. I know. But we're going to have you back and hope everyone else will join us again as well as the Reels of Justice keep turning.
Count it.
Femur.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.